All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the first in the new Day One Executive Interview Series. My name is April Armstrong. If we haven't had the chance to meet yet, I am the host of this interview series, and I am writing a book by the same working title anyway, called The Day One Executive, which aims to help people stand out on day one of that new job or new career, as I like to say, as the executive you already are if you choose to be that. There are distinguishing attitudes and behaviors that will get you noticed and that can help you materially elevate and accelerate your career. But many of us weren't taught those things growing up, and we may not have learned those things in school, and we may or may not have had a mentor or role model in our lives to show us those things. And that's where I'm hoping my book and this interview series will be able to contribute to your life. So it is my great honor and joy to welcome in our inaugural interview today, Janika LeMaitre, who is an international etiquette and personal branding expert. And this is such a perfect place to start from my point of view, this interview series, because standing out on day one, it starts with those first impressions. And nothing makes the first impression more than etiquette. And so, Jan, I'm just so delighted to have you. But let me just mention, a little bit more about your background for anyone that might be joining us here. Why should we be interested in what Jan has to share with us? Well, Jan's experience spans over 18 years working in multiple luxury industries and for multiple luxury brands, ranging from five-star hotels to airlines, fashion retail, and fine jewelry. She is a licensed trainer with the renowned Protocol School of Washington, which trains White House staff, diplomats, Department of Defense executives and their protocol staffs, as well as global brands like Disney, Louis Vuitton. It's a well-regarded protocol school and etiquette school, as well as the British School of Etiquette. So Jan has done her homework. She's literally gone to school for this, and she is an executive herself who now helps executives and aspiring executives stand out starting on day one. So Jan, welcome. Thank you so much for saying yes to this interview invitation.
I appreciate you inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So let's dive right in, Jan. First of all, I want to say Jan is founder and CEO of an etiquette training company called The Better Professional. And you can find her at, simply Google that, The Better Professional, and she will pop to the top of your list. Or www.better-professional.com. That will take you there as well. And something that I saw, Jan, on your website that right away jumped out at me, because I talk in my book about what I call multiple forms of currency, that there are multiple forms of currency, and that it's important that people understand what currency matters to them. What do they value the most, right? Money is certainly a form of currency, but there's other forms of currency that I talk about in my book, such as autonomy, such as the ability to have flexibility in your life, the ability to do work that feels meaningful to you, right? That you need to know what matters to you, because that's going to empower you to negotiate and create working arrangements that feel rewarding to you in ways that matter to you. And this may be different for everybody. So that's the angle I take on this concept of multiple forms of currency in my book. But something I saw on your website, Jan, that really got my attention is you say professionalism is a form of currency. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by this?
Absolutely. As I was researching and learning and really diving into this topic of business etiquette and personal brand, which I feel like is a really hot topic right now, I realized something, and that was, if you are a professional person, no matter where you are in the world, if you can err on the side of formality with whatever you're doing, whether it be how you present yourself, how you speak, the way your mannerisms are, this is an internationally recognized symbol of showing respect. So if you can master that, then you now have what is professionalism in the form of currency. And different currencies are recognized around the world. So my first question to many professionals, the question is, would I invest in you, and why? Are you a true professional?
Wow, I love that. And, can you give an example of what that might look like? How might that apply in a young professional's life, or really anyone that's maybe starting that new job? What might that look like? How might someone, how might that professionalism as a form of currency really show up?
Yes, that's a good question. It's interesting. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the movie Wall Street 2. I know it's not exactly the best storyline for investors, but a great example is when the main character, the young gentleman, he has a business deal that he's about to perform with Asians that have come into the conference room. He's running late, but he knows that he's supposed to give a gift. So he passes on a gift, he bows politely, and he says some formal words in their language to show that he's making the effort. And they're receiving that as something positive, and that he's making the effort, even though he can't stay. And then he runs out of the conference room. But I think it's a really great example of understanding that you are supposed to give a gift in certain cultures is just one way of showing that respect and being a true professional, and showing your colleagues that you understand what it takes to establish great long-term business relationships. And it is 1 inch at a time with these little gestures.
So I love that. And I love that concept of the 1 inch at a time and the little gestures. And I also love in that story, as someone who lived in a foreign country myself at one time, that he took the time to master even one phrase, even a greeting in that foreign, in that culture's language as a gesture of respect. That's really cool too. That costs nothing to do. Right. So, but it's that another example of that one little inch. And Jan, that's maybe a perfect segue into something else that I really saw in some of your writing that really stood out to me. You talk about, well, actually, let me start with this. When people hear the word etiquette, and I'll speak for myself, even as someone who probably wanted nothing to do with this a good bit of my life. It just felt very, sort of hoity-toity. It felt, very exclusive, and something that I've written about is that, there was a time when etiquette and quote manners were, in fact, they were designed to exclude. They were designed to elevate and separate people, the wealthy people from the poor people, right? And I think that's probably part of where some of my resistance came. But the aha I've had in my own life, and really the example you just gave is an example of this, but is that actually etiquette is the ultimate includer. It's the ultimate in inclusivity in terms of, this appreciation for diversity, and that we take it upon ourselves to go that extra inch or extra mile to create an inclusive and welcoming space for all that's honoring of all. But, when people hear that term, they often go right to like thinking of like using that right fork at dinner and holding the teacup with the finger up, right? And, it's not every day that we face those situations that we may find ourselves in that formal dining situation, but you say, Jan, great reputations are built with high standards and the ability to master those standards in every single interaction. Yeah. And so I'm curious. I love that. And I'm curious, what are some examples of those standards that you would say, really can and should show up daily?
So this is what I would say. If you had to write yourself a manual of code of ethics for April Armstrong, what would you put in that manual? If no one else was writing it for you, you had to hold yourself accountable. What type of core values would you put in there? And so my question to you is, how do you want to see yourself as a more respectable, reputable person. What does that look like? And it could be someone that you've seen that really models some great behaviors, such as someone who is consistently on time, someone who consistently is true to their word. So, for example, I just put a post on my Instagram account today at better.professional, and it's all about the cancel culture, how a lot of people will say, yes, I'm coming, I'm going to be there. And then at the last minute, they back out for whatever reason it is, or they're an hour late. How does that make someone else feel? Do they want to trust you going forward to be on time? It's something as simple as that. And most likely, no, the invitations will stop coming your way. Other things you could put in there is, do you show humility? Is it something, are you someone who is humble, or are you someone who likes to brag a lot? And in your code of ethics and the way you handle yourself, do you want to be that person that is a bit more reserved and holds themselves to a standard and says, you know what, I'm not going to show everything off that I've got to show. It's going to make other people feel a certain way. How do I want other people to feel? Well, I'd like to make them feel comfortable around me. And what does that look like? Perhaps I don't tell them about XYZ, where I just went shopping here or went on vacation there. Maybe I need to learn about them and what makes them feel comfortable when I'm around them. What type of conversations should I have? These are just a few examples. I'm not sure if I answered your question well, or if you'd like me to shine some light on some more.
I think these are great examples, Jan. I mean, I think that idea of sort of the code of ethics, I think that's a really intriguing question. It's like, companies set out value statements.
Yes.
Organizations famously set out value statements. Mm. And I actually like to say organizational values are really less about what you say you value, and they're really more about, would somebody say that about you?
Right.
Those values really are nothing but words on paper, unless somebody looking in at your company, watching your company operate, would they observe those things to be true about your company? And I think likewise, to your point, about you.
About
right?
you.
So if you were to set your own, like you said, code of ethics or code of values, like I think that's a great challenge that people can take. It's a very practical thing. And then I could imagine that, there's something to be said probably for periodically looking at that, sort of doing your own kind of code of ethics audit on yourself. Am I living into this?
Right.
Or these things that other people would say about me based on how they experience me?
Yes, absolutely. And when you're thinking of yourself as your own brand, which it really is expected in today's culture, you have a brand online, you have a brand in person, and you have a reputation that precedes you by word of mouth. So if you think about the type of brand and your own core values, your own code of ethics, the standards you hold yourself to every single day, whatever business you run or you own, or whatever the company is you work for, the leadership team you work underneath, whoever you are, whatever industry you're in, you have to be able to identify with those core values. And so the brand of your company, their own mission, their vision, is it yours? Is it in parallel to what you believe yourself? And so I think there's some crossover there.
Yeah, I love it. And I really see, organizations to me, it can sound so sterile, but really it's about every individual in that organization, and each one of us being an expression of the brand of the organizations we support or that we work for or that we work with or represent. But I think also this idea of something I talk about in my book is being the CEO of your own life. Yes. And to your point, Jan, about professionalism as a form of currency, and are people willing to invest in you, and why should they invest in you, right? Whether that's even, giving you that first job, or maybe you're a consultant and it's inviting you into a certain engagement as a company or as an organization. Are they, they're essentially making an investment on a promise, right? On a, they're taking a risk. And this idea that professionalism and etiquette is one way, in fact, a very simple way that we can reduce the perceived level of risk, because they get that sense, even when they don't know yet how you're going to perform in the job, but what they do know is how you're showing up right now. Yes. And that comes down to professionalism and, and etiquette. I really love that idea of standards and mastering this handful of standards, in every single interaction. And I'm also feeling like I'm hearing you, Jan, you're talking about, it's like an invitation for all of us to be more conscious about how we show up, as opposed to, so many of us were operating on autopilot based on this accumulation of really unconscious habits and behaviors and standards that were good enough or okay in our families or whatever. And I mean, I like to joke like, hey, some of us were raised by wolves, right? I mean, we, and others of us, were, maybe you were fortunate to have, some sort of training, so to speak, in your life, about sort of how to eat properly at the table, things like this. But this idea that we can actually be in question, we can become the question about every aspect of how, we're showing up in the world and the effect we're having on other people through our interactions. And that this idea of these daily standards is one way into that. It seemed, I like that. Is there anything else you'd want to say on that?
Absolutely. I think that I'd like to add, if you meet someone that has very high standards for themselves, I want you to think going forward, who is that person? Do I admire them? How are they presenting themselves to the world? I find when I meet someone who holds themselves to very particular standards, it makes me stop and think for a moment. And I'm actually quite curious. I'm inspired. I think, wow, that's impressive. Not everybody does that. And so it's one of those leadership qualities that is often missing. So do you admire someone that really doesn't care about what's going on with themselves and how they disrespect other people? Probably not. You admire someone who does set a great example and does show those formalities. Even though it's a bit lost, it's still there.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think one of our greatest teachers on etiquette is really something as simple as noticing how we feel in other people's presences.
Yes.
And where we're in the presence and when we're in the presence of someone who, like yourself, Jan, who is schooled, right, in the art of professionalism, is schooled in the art and the nuances of etiquette. And what if it's not about this big long rule book, but that it's really about this way that we can make other people feel in our presence, and that by noticing and paying more attention to how we feel in the presence of others, that can be one of our greatest teachers in this, in terms of, cherry picking maybe some of those standards that you talk about in your writing, right? About that we can be showing in every interaction.
Right. Absolutely. It's not something that it generally is something you can learn that's free of charge. But to go that extra level, that's when you'd bring me into the equation.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, right? To go that extra level, or to maybe get there faster, right?
Exactly.
We can learn sort of slowly over time, or we can pay for the fast pass and bring a Jan into our lives or into our companies to really get us there faster. Right. I love that. And I think certainly in business organizations, that makes sense. You have a big deal coming up. You've got a big, in fact, I can tell a quick story of a client of one of my clients that was expanding into Europe, into the UK and into Italy. I won't go into too many specifics so that the company becomes identifiable. But basically, when they showed up in Italy, this organization, this company that had very successful in the US, dominant in their industry actually in the US, but when they showed up in Italy, they were completely unschooled in the etiquette and expectations and protocol and ways of being culturally even. And
Yes.
you know, you might think, oh, it's like Epcot. They're just like us. They just speak a different language and have better food and better fashion sense.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a very different culture, and they have a very different way of showing up at work. They have a very different way of interacting in business environments. And as an example, they don't want to start out right away talking business. They want to start out connecting very much on a personal level and getting to know you as a person. They don't value, like maybe many Americans do, this workhorse mentality of, 12 hours a day or whatever it takes to get the job done on time. Yeah. They value relationships, quite frankly, above all even. And so they found this company and the management of this company to be, too pushy, too demanding, and they weren't able to get that rapport established on the front end. They felt a little disrespected that the company wasn't investing more in the rapport building piece of it. And the deal ended up falling apart, which was so sad actually, because the company, is a fantastic company, but and they'll make another approach at some point. But it's an example of, I think, what you're talking about, Jan, about being willing to take it upon yourself, whether you're talking about one person, another person, you're meeting them for an interview, you're going to start working with them. Maybe they're your new boss, or maybe they're your new subordinate even, or a company, or even in this case, a foreign, a company in another country, right? Like that you take it upon yourself to become conscious of what matters to those people. And you calibrate, calibrate yourself, not to be inauthentic, but to be respectful and honoring, demonstratively honoring of, and opening the possibility of a relationship by demonstrating that respect and that rapport.
Right. Absolutely. I find that when doing business, especially if you can look through the other person's eyes, where they've grown up, what the history of that particular country is, you start to understand, even with the cuisine, the type of drink that they drink, you start to understand how they make decisions and why. And so establishing a rapport in many other countries is really important. And it looks different in so many different places. Even, for example, in Australia, we speak the same English as Americans, but not really. We speak, our slang's different. And even in Australia, the different cities you're in, they have their own slangs for different words. But the way you would approach someone in business is so different. You would not beat around the bush. You would not tell them what your qualifications are, where you went to school. You just don't introduce yourself in that manner. And they will make fun of you if you do. However, in the United States, it's really important that someone tells the other person where they went to school, what their major was, and rattles off their educational history and work history.
Establishing credibility, is important in the US, right?
Yeah, it's valued very highly here, but in Australia, it is not valued highly. And so a lot of people in important positions, like C-suite level, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you have something that makes you really established in your field, you don't tell people. You just don't, because you will be seen as not as credible as someone who is bragging. And so you can see the difference in culture with two countries that speak very similar English, but have such different demeanors and approaches when it comes to interacting and earning respect.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I like to say that really each one of us is like, a universe unto ourselves, really, right? And as fascinating as even another country or another culture is, really each person we meet is just as fascinating. And if we could show that same level of curiosity, for each other, how would our work interactions be different? How would our world be different? And
right.
I think that's a really great example of of a culture that you might assume is so similar, right, with that same language.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you, Jan. You have worked for some various, very glamorous, I would say, industries and brands.
Yeah.
And what would you say to that ambitious person just entering their, the professional world, or maybe they just got, maybe they're a seasoned professional, they just got promoted into that new executive role, but it's someone just entering that professional role, who might find themselves doing some very unglamorous things as part of that first job, or, it might be easy to be kind of disillusioned or bitter, like, wow, this isn't what I expected. Right. What is something that, and certainly they're maybe not feeling super qualified yet because they're new in the role. What is something they can do to demonstrate, stand out professionalism and get noticed?
I love that question because it's one that is not asked often enough. I find that if you're just starting out, always present yourself well. Meaning, how does your hair look? Is it neat and tidy? Are your teeth clean? Do you have good breath? I'm talking about the fundamentals because these are so important. If you can master these early on, is your clothing clean? Unless your role doesn't specifically require clothing that remains clean throughout whatever it is you're doing. But if you can, even your shoes, if they're polished nicely, how are you presenting yourself? And further, to add to that, if you can speak kindly and respectfully to everybody, it doesn't matter who it is you're talking to. Don't think anybody is beneath you. Always treat everyone with kindness, because you never know in 10 years what opportunity could come knocking because somebody referred you and they remembered how you made them feel that day 10 years ago. That would be my advice to someone starting out. And do your job well. Take your job seriously. Even if you're in the shipping department and you have to ship boxes, make sure that tape is put on beautifully and straight. Make sure that you're packaging it and it's not looking like it's just an afterthought. Think of how you receive a package from Louis Vuitton. I know you mentioned them earlier. If you got something in the mail, how would you expect it to come? Well, one person did that shipping, packaging, and that's to a standard. So you have to take those standards seriously because those little details add up in the future. You'll start to pay attention to them no matter what role you're in. You'll always understand what attention to detail means, especially if you were held accountable early on in your career.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm definitely, hearing, and that's so loud and clear, Jan, that, that attention to detail, even the seemingly smallest details, really matter. And to me, it's not just about even respecting the job, right? Obviously someone's paying you to do X, Y, Z. It should be done well. But to me, it's really about yourself, right? You deserve that, taking pride, that you deserve to give yourself that feeling of pride that comes from attending to and paying attention to that level of detail. And that's probably not a level of detail that most of us naturally take. So that's really, that's interesting because I really hear that as sort of that's an example of one of those, you talked at the top of the call, Jan, about going that extra inch even, right? That inch by inch. I mean, but that it adds up, right? It adds up. I love that. No detail is too small is what I'm actually hearing you say also.
Absolutely. If you're in a position of leadership, you most likely look at the tiny details because perhaps you were once in a position where you had to make sure those details added up. So when you recognize that in somebody else, you pay attention to that person, and and you admire that quality in somebody else when you see them early in their career.
Wow. I think that's a really great point. That top executives got there because they pay attention to the details.
Yes.
They care about the details. At one time in their life, they were responsible for the details.
Right.
They still see themselves as responsible for the details.
Yeah.
And they see that in someone else.
Yes.
Other people that are, that don't have that same standard may not even notice that your shoes aren't polished, or that your shirt has that stain on it, or that tape isn't quite right, or whatever. But that is exactly the kind of thing that actually can get you noticed, because top executives, they care about that. They notice that.
Yeah.
And you might be among the very few that are paying that level of attention and showing that level of care for the work that you do. And, I love that. Yeah. It's funny. I talk sometimes about standing out is ridiculously hard at times and ridiculously easy at the same time. And I think what you're describing, Jan, is, these are some examples of it's actually really easy. It's just, you have to choose to pay this level of attention.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I might even use what you just said.
Feel free to. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Jan, what can you share with us an example of, a story of what is it that even ever put this on your radar? What is there a story from your own life that caused you to decide to really care about this area of etiquette and professionalism, and actually devote a good bit of your career now to helping others master this in their lives? Why do you care about this?
What's
your why?
My why, I love that. Simon Sinek, I love it. My why, I realized that wherever I was working at any given time, I would constantly be asked, how do you get along with everybody? Where did you learn that? How did you learn about presentation skills? And I actually bring a lot of it back to my flying days when I was flying for an international airline. And so and this is the pivotal moment that made me want to fly for this airline. I hope you're ready for this story. I was working, I was 18. And I knew I'd wanted to become an airline hostess, actually. I'd been working 3 jobs. I was studying. I then went to hospitality college and tourism school because I knew that was a career path for me. And I had to make sure I was studying getting the right experience. So I'm working for a hotel, 4.5-star hotel in Perth, in banquets. And if you know about working in the hotel industry, you don't go into other departments. You stay where you're told. So I had to go upstairs to the front desk for something. And I walk up into the lobby area, and I had all the marble floors. They were polished. They're so beautifully. You could see your reflection. There's a stunning chandelier coming down from the ceiling. And this fragrance that just permeated through the whole lobby. I remember this feeling of thinking, wow, I'm really in somewhere. I feel like I'm somewhere special. Wow. And I see this sea of red hats, and I'm sure you'll know which airline I'm talking about, but I see the sea of red hats and these white scarves cascading across the shoulders of the ladies that are working for this airline. They all have their makeup impeccably done, red lips, sand-colored suits with golden buttons, and they all looked so elegant and in unison. It caught me. It took me by surprise, and I was completely. It had me. I knew I had to work for that airline, so it took me 3 years because I had to be 21 to do that. But I knew they had standards, and I wanted to have standards like that because I could see they looked like they were the best, and I wanted to be part of the best.
Wow. I have such a visual on that. And I'm feeling the energy of of that and the impression that made on you. They did stand out. They did stand out.
Yes. And the training I received was very intensive with regards to appearance, because who you were interacting with were people from all cultures, everywhere around the world. I think the only place I did not travel to was South America. I've traveled to every continent otherwise, and almost all continents now, and so many different cultures. What I learned is that if you present yourself a certain way, no matter where you're from, you are showing your self-respect, and that self-respect comes out.
Gosh, I love that. I really love that, Jan. And what a powerful introduction to, and really, master's level education probably in intercultural etiquette. And I really do. I love that idea that you are included in that, right? That it's not just, yes, it's about how other people feel in our presence. And it's not just about other people, that you're also included in, that we are also included in that that respect for ourselves also deepens. That's a great story. Thank you for that. I think I will always have that image now of those red hats. And I will say that airline is probably to this day the envy of all airlines. So they've clearly maintained their standards.
Yeah.
So, just a couple of, quick questions before we close, Jan. First of all, so for people that, I think I want to make it clear that while this is something that it pays to pay attention to, it pays to care about this, it pays, quite frankly, to commit yourself to being really a lifelong student of etiquette and professionalism. But, what about, hey, we all have our faux pas, right? We all have that moment where, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I wore that. How can a person recover from a faux pas? How can they recover from a faux pas?
Oh, brilliant question. I have faux pas myself. And so what I say to anyone else is, if you say something that doesn't resonate, if you have that pit in your stomach and you know that you've not approached a situation the way you possibly could have to the standard that you wanted to, be ready to say sorry and take ownership. It's okay to say sorry. I know a lot of cultures, work cultures, will tell you that word is not okay, just apologize. But when someone hears that and you say it genuinely, it can be through something written or in person, handwritten or in person, and you follow it up with, some flowers or something. Take the person out for a coffee or a lunch and really take a moment to spend time with that person if you feel like you said something incorrectly. Now, if you wore something and it wasn't quite there, having a pashmina or something in your handbag, if you're a lady, to wrap around yourself to cover up any spill or something that might be too revealing when you're supposed to go into a restaurant and your shoulders are supposed to be covered. That's a good trick that I use, and a couple of friends of mine use that. Other faux pas, having an emergency kit in your handbag is actually my savior, and I recommend to everybody. An emergency kit meaning a really small makeup style pouch where you have a couple of Band-Aids, you have a little bit of lip gloss, you have a travel size hairspray, anything you feel like that you might need at a moment's notice. Safety pins, bobby pins for your hair. For a man, I'm sure that they probably don't need bobby pins.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah,
but certainly like extra tie maybe, and
extra tie,
right? Yeah, good to have on hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I was at so first of all, I love the story you told about being willing to apologize, and that it's okay to apologize like that if you make that kind of we might call it a faux pas, but like you said, you say something that might have inadvertently offended someone, or just didn't land, or something else that, like you said, you sort of feel that pit in your stomach, that it doesn't have to end there, that it is okay to make that heartfelt, sincere apology, and that can repair that. I think that's really a beautiful thing for people to be able to hear. We don't have to be perfect, and that it's ultimately about really everything I'm hearing, Jan, from you to me is reinforcing that it's ultimately about the relationships, and that there is space for that in the relationship building. There's space for that apology, but a quick funny story on the example of clothing, right? I was going to an awards. I love your tip. I was going to an awards ceremony, and I agree with your tip. Although I am going to double check my own emergency bag as a result of this conversation. It probably needs to be updated. But I was going to an awards ceremony, and I was actually receiving the award, and my parents were coming, and it was a special day. And my dress, literally, like the zipper in the back, just basically split. As
oh my
I was able to get into a restroom and everything. But luckily, I actually had, for that one occasion, and I'm realizing I probably need to make this sort of a standard thing and have this in my car at all times. But for that one occasion, I had brought a backup dress, and thank goodness that I had that backup dress, because I don't know what I would have done, frankly, Jan. And so, I mean, it was indisguisable, we could say. The only thing that would help was a backup dress. So yeah, that's a really great tip for people to think about what would they want to have maybe in that sort of emergency kit. And if it really matters, whether it's an interview or that first day on a job or that big meeting, or in my case, that award ceremony, having that backup outfit, for, gentlemen having that backup tie, that is, I think, a really, really good pragmatic tip, Jan.
Absolutely. Anything high stakes, you want to make sure you've got
I can personally attest to this. Yes.
Yeah.
And a question that I got from someone before the interview here, that someone emailed me about when they found out that we were doing this online interview, was, what about, do you have any tips, Jan? What tips can you offer people in this world of Zoom and this virtual world, where so many people are now really having the majority of their business interactions and meetings online? They may not, I have several clients that I've never even met yet in person. It's all been online. I feel like I know them, but I haven't actually met them in person. It's so strange. But what, and obviously I think everyone, hopefully by now, although I'm astonished how many people still don't seem to know this, but generally people should by now know common things like muting your line during a telecall, a meeting, things like this, but, minimizing background noise where possible. But what other tips, if any, might you offer from a professionalism standpoint to help people, again, polish that persona on something like a Zoom or a video call of some type?
I actually have something funny to tell you leading into this. I received an email about, actually, from Rent the Runway. I don't know if you've heard of the company, but they were talking about how they received all these statistics that they wanted to publish to their users. And they actually published one about the hybrid type of work outfit, and what is that when you're virtual. And they said, well, I'm business on the top, party on the bottom, meaning you're wearing pajamas on the bottom and a t-shirt on, something more formal on the top. So I actually recommend that when you are on a virtual call, you get dressed the way you want to feel, because the way you feel will help you present better when you're talking on a call. If you're expected to talk, and always be expected to have 2 cents that you're nominated to speak and put into that call. Some other tips are, if you do have a background that is very distracting, You want to make sure you find a clear wall like this, something that is not distracting at all. And of course, have your good lighting on. But other great tips for etiquette are if you enter the room, a couple of minutes early. There's something called Zoom etiquette. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's any platform, no matter what you're using. If it's Blue Jeans or Cisco, no matter what you're using. If you log on 5 minutes earlier, that is considered on time.
Yeah.
If you're there at exactly the time, you might be considered late, depending on how the organizers might feel. But it is actually 5 minutes early, and that will help you get an edge with your virtual. Also, your name. I know it sounds strange, but when you're reading people's names, make sure you capitalize your name. Capitalize the first letter for your first name and the first letter of your last name. That way you look like you are, well, for myself, Janika LeMaitre. And if I prefer to be called Jan, you would put that in brackets or whatever it is you prefer to be called by. Also, put yourself on mute, as you said. And if you need to raise your hand for something, there's often a raise hand button. So use that.
That's a great tip. And I think that last one, even, especially in a professional environment, taking the time to even experiment a little on the front end with the technology so that you're familiarized with it. And, these days there's all sorts of virtual platforms, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Adobe Connect, Zoom, but all of those, you can do a little research on the front end to understand what the features are and familiarize yourself with them on the front end. Because to your point, right, quietly raising your hand on that Zoom is less disruptive than, barging through the front door of the virtual meeting with your comment or your question. Mm-hmm. I love that. And and I can't remember, there's a famous coach, is it Vince Lombardi? There's a famous coach who said, if you're on time, you're late.
Yes.
but I think to your point, Jan, that's even more important in a virtual world. As important as it ever was in-person meetings, it's even more important in a virtual world because, to your point, there can be connection issues, there can be audio issues, and whatever that meeting start time is, that executive in that team, they are expecting that meeting to start at that time, not to have 15 people just dialing in at that time. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think you make a really good point by highlighting that in a virtual world. Thank you, Jan. Well, as we close, I want to just invite you, Jan. Are there any other tips you might offer, or any specific place you might offer as a good place to start for someone who's looking to raise their game, or as you would say, polish their persona? And speaking of that, I would certainly recommend that a great place for people to start is actually your podcast.
Yes.
Jan has a phenomenal podcast. I've listened to her whole series. Series 1 on this, multiple episodes there, but it's called Polish Your Persona. I love the name of it.
Thank you.
And because that's something that we can do every single day, we can benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
So Polish Your Persona, it's available on all of the standard podcast platforms. So whatever your preference is on that, you can find her amazing podcast there. Listen to it on your way to work or when you're making your coffee in the morning, and you're going to polish your persona just by virtue of listening to it. You will start to show up differently. But what else, if anything, Jan, would you offer or recommend to someone that's looking to raise their game starting today? Any
starting today? I just had a blog that I wrote last month. It's called Maximizing Your 8 p.m. Routine. And basically it means how you can set yourself for less decision fatigue the next day. What you can do the night before to help yourself prepare to have the best day going forward, or an easier morning without choosing so much and making decisions. I'm sure you've heard of that term, decision fatigue. So if you set up your outfit the night before, you look at your calendar of events for the forthcoming day and you say, well, I have a meeting on Zoom. I then have lunch with someone I'm networking with, and then I have a cocktail party later. What do I want to wear? So maybe it's 2 outfits or maybe it's 1. Put everything out, the shoes, the handbag, make sure it's got everything in it, your briefcase, put out your whatever it is that you might be accessorizing with, your watch, your sunglasses, any jewelry. And that way, when you get ready in the morning, you're not having to rush around to make sure that you're getting ready in the right outfit. And I know this happens a lot with myself and quite a few people that I know. Some people have a work wardrobe where it is just like Steve Jobs, jeans and a turtleneck. And
Mark Zuckerberg, the same black outfit every day.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And you can see, actually, my husband does that himself. He has the same pair of pants and how many colors, same t-shirt and how many colors. But it takes away those decisions that you would generally spend that effort and time putting into making small choices on your outfit alone. So do that the night before, and that's my recommendation to help you start your next day with a lot less stress.
Wow. Well, Jan, that is a tip that I could start putting to use right away. I love that tip. And what I hear in that is, again, this reminder that showing up as the executive you choose to be, it is really just that. It's a choice. It's a choice to either have that morning flurry, in the example you just gave, right? That stress running out the door, hither and yon with whatever clothes you can find that aren't wrinkly, if that, as opposed to the choice to invest. And yes, it is an investment. It is an investment to carve that extra time out the night before when you're calmer and there's a little space, to be thoughtful about what the day ahead holds, and to be conscious and intentional in the choosing of your outfit and the laying out of things, et cetera, to make that morning time bring greater ease to that next morning, because that just means there's more of you available when you do walk in the door of that meeting, when you do walk in the door with those clients. So that's just really thank you for that reminder, because professionalism, that currency of professionalism, it's not an automatic thing. And it's not something that we can just buy the book and download it and there we are. It takes effect like a drug. Right. No, it's something that we have to, if only gym memberships work like that. I've had to learn the hard way that they don't. But the idea that this is really something, it's a daily commitment that we're making to ourselves, and through that, to the people that we're privileged and honored to have the opportunity to interact with on a daily basis. And that by choosing to make that investment, we can elevate our careers. We can have greater choices in our careers. New doors will open. I think that's so exciting. And this is a great example of it's not about going to the best school. You don't have to go to Harvard to be able to have all of the advantages of what you were describing, Jan. So I really I want to thank you for the time you've taken here, the encouragement that you've offered in a very pragmatic way to anybody that may watch this video, and for the inspiration that you are, because you really do embody this. You are a day one executive, Jan. You embody professionalism as currency and those daily standards. So I just thank you. And I want to remind everybody, check out Janika, her podcast, Polish Your Persona. Go check out her website, thebetter-professional.com. If you're looking to bring people into your organization that can train your team and how they show up with clients, Janika is a brilliant choice for that. Janika, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
We'll talk again. Take good care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.